Today we are working on lesson 160, and that's going to be on page 289 in your textbook. And you'll see at the top where it says multiplying by 10, 100, and 1000. We've practiced with this before also, not in the textbook, but as it came up in other areas. And this should be pretty simple. The difficult part will be moving the decimal point automatically without having to actually multiply. But once you get the hang of it, it's really easy. And you're going to think, whoa, that is so simple. So looking at the rules at the top of the page, to multiply a whole number by 10, 100, or 1,000, annex as many zeros to the whole number as in the power of 10. Now, if this is a whole number already to start with, it's just going to stick zeros at the end of that number. For example, if I know my tens times table, what's 3 times 10? 30. It's a 3 with a 0 at the end. Okay, what's 8 times 10? 80. That's an 8 with a 0 at the end. So what's 15 times 10? Well, that's a 15 with a 0 at the end, or 150. And I could go on. Same thing if I multiply by 100, I'm just going to put 2 zeros at the end. If I multiply by 1,000, I'm going to put 3 zeros at the end. Now look at number 2. To multiply a decimal by 10, 100, or 1,000, I'm going to move the decimal point to the right. Okay, everybody raise your right hand. I'm going to move it to the right. Okay, I'm going to move it to the right as many places as there are zeros. So 10 has 1 0, I'd move it 1 place. 100 has 2 zeros, I'd move it 2 places. 1,000 has 3 zeros, I'd move it 3 places. Now you will get to some, when you get older, that you'll have to move it 4 places, 5 places, 6 places, whatever, however many zeros you have, but we won't deal with numbers that large this year. So they give you some examples. They started with 0.163. So if I say that like a decimal, it's 163 thousandths. Now if I multiply that by 10, I'm going to move that decimal point from the before the 1 place to the right. I know I'm moving it 1 place because there's 1 0 in 10. So if I move it 1 place to the right, I'm going to get 1 and 63 hundredths. I can check myself on the calculator, I can check myself multiplying it longhand, but really all I need to do is move the decimal point, the number of places that I have zeros in my factor of 10. The next example says 0.438 or 438 thousandths times 100. 100 has 2 zeros, so I'm going to move that decimal point 2 places to the right, giving me 43.8 because it was in front of the 4. I'm moving it 2 places to the right. And we'll show what that looks like on the board. Then they give you 0.291 or 291 thousandths times 1,000. And that gives you the answer of 291. If I move that 3 places to the right, because there's 3 zeros in 1,000, notice that the decimal point disappears because it's understood at the end of a number. I don't have to write it in there just because the number started out as a decimal before I multiplied it by 1,000. Number 3, when multiplying a decimal by a power of 10, that's 10, 100, 1,000, etc., moving the decimal point and annexing zeros may be necessary. So for example, if I start out with 3/10, 0.3, and I multiply that by 10, I'm moving the decimal point 1 place because there's 1 0 in 10, and I end up with 3. Notice how I dropped the decimal point because it's understood at the end. Next example shows 0.3 or 3/10 times 100. Well, I have to move that decimal point 2 places to the right, but there's only 1 decimal place. So how do I get another place? I annex a 0. So 3/10 times 100 is 30. Notice I dropped that decimal point because it's understood at the end. And then same 3/10 times 1,000. I have 3 zeros in 1,000, so I'm going to move that decimal point 3 places to the right. I'm going to have to annex enough zeros to where I can move that decimal point, and my answer is 300 there. Okay, we're gonna do the class practice together. Set this back down without dropping it. Okay. I've already written most of my information up here. It didn't come out very dark. I thought I was being clever using a nice pretty aqua colored pen today, marker today, but it's not showing up very well. Let's see. Let me do it this way. All right. I may have to move my computer a little bit after we get started. Okay, so my first number is 18. So if I start out with 18 and I multiply it by 10, I'm going to put a 0 at the end. If I multiply it by 100, I'm going to put 2 zeros at the end. If I multiply it by 1,000, I'm putting 3 zeros at the end. And I'm going to put a comma here because 3 places. Why didn't I put a comma here? You don't really need a comma if there's just 4 places. But once you get more than 4 places, you need to put your comma. Okay, for letter B, maybe I'll hold this so I don't have to keep reaching. All right, for letter B, it's 273. So I'm going to start by multiplying by 10. I'm going to annex 1 0 at the end. Multiply by 100. 2 zeros. Don't forget my comma because it's more than 4 places. Multiply by 1,000. 3 zeros in 1,000, so I annex 3 zeros at the end. This is getting so easy, right? Okay, I was going to go on and do C, D, and E on these, but when they're whole numbers, it's a little bit too easy. So let's just move on. Look at number 2, multiply each decimal or mixed decimal. Remember, a mixed decimal would be like if I said 1.5, because I have a whole number in front of the decimal as well as the decimal value. And I'm going to multiply each by 10, 100, and 1,000 again, just like we did on number 1. But this time I'm moving my decimal point, and I may have to annex zeros with that. So my first number is 1 and 389 thousandths. Okay, so on this one, if I move my decimal point 1 place, I get 1. No, I don't. Let's see, let's try that again. I get 13 and 89 hundredths. Then multiplying by 100, I have 2 zeros, so I'm going to move my decimal point 2 places. So, and it's going to go there. So it's 138 and 9 tenths. And then multiplying by 1,000, I have 3 zeros, so I'm going to move it 3 places. So that's going to give me 1, 3, 8, 9, and my decimal point would be at the end, but I don't need to put it there if it's at the end. It's going to be understood. All right, let's look at letter B, 2.764. All right, multiplying by 10, I'm going to move it 1 place. 27 and 64 hundredths. Multiplying by 100, I'm going to move it 2 places. 1, 2, so that's 2, 7, 6, and 4 tenths. Multiplying by 1,000, I'm moving it 3 places. So that's 2,764, 2,764. Okay, letter C, 7 and 803 thousandths. All right, so if I multiply by 10, I'm moving it 1 place. 78 and 3 hundredths. If I multiply by 100, I'm moving it 2 places. 780 and 3 tenths. If I multiply by 1,000, I'm moving it 3 places. 7, 8, 0, 3, and I don't have to write my decimal point because it's at the end. It's understood. Okay, I'm going to let you do D and E. And F. There's an F on all of these. Number 3, multiply multiply each decimal by 10, 100, and 1,000 respectively, but I may have to annex zeros on this one. So, for letter A, I have 1500s. If I move that decimal point one place, because I multiply by 10, I get 1 and 5/10. If I multiply by 100, I'm moving it two places, that's going to give me 15. If I multiply by 1,000, I have to move it three places. Now, I don't have three places, so remember, I can annex a 0 and then move it. Oops. I don't know the decimal, because I'm moving it to the right. 150. Okay. Letter B, 2800s. All right, so if I multiply by 10, I'm going to get 2 and 8/10. If I multiply by 100, I'm going to get 28. If I multiply by 1,000, I need three places to move it, but I don't have three. 1, 2, 3. I got to annex a 0. 280 is my answer. I can't even tell if you all can see that. That's a little better. Okay. Letter C is 5/10. Well, I'm only starting out with one decimal place, so I'm going to have to annex some zeros here. So if I multiply by 10, I get 5. If I multiply by 100, I have to have two places to move that decimal point, so that's going to give me 50. And if I multiply by 1,000, I'm going to need a third decimal place so that I can move it three places for the three zeros, and I get 500. Okay, letter D, 1600s. If you can see that better. Okay, so if I multiply by 10, I'm going to move the decimal point one place. That's 1 6/10. If I multiply by 100, I'm moving it two places. That's 16. And if I multiply by 1,000, I'm going to move it three places. That means I've got to annex a 0 and make it 160. Okay, I think you can handle E and F, and then make sure you finish. Oh, there's only an E. There's an F on the first one, but not 2 or 3. Okay, so you should be able to finish that page. After you finish that page, take a picture, submit, and then go to the next assignment, because you have a little quiz on the fraction decimal equivalents from those charts at the tops of pages 285 and 287. You can use your calculator, so you shouldn't miss any of those.